Welcome to Live Ball, presented by Harper Volkswagen. Here are your hosts, Paige Dauer and Todd Kelly Jr.
Good morning and welcome into Live Ball. Paige Dauer alongside BFL Todd Kelly Jr. presented by Harper Volkswagen. Always nice to start our Friday mornings inside this beautiful showroom. And even though it's a bit of a gloomy morning outside, TK, I'm sure we'll help you brighten your morning as we get ready for Tennessee and Florida down in the swamp. It's a night game. You know how it all goes. The house of horrors it's been for Tennessee, and what an environment it is at Ben Hill Griffin Stadium. But for you, TK, what's the energy, what's the reaction emotionally that you get when it's Florida week, and it's been a long time since Tennessee's been able to capture a win down there in Florida?
Take the opportunity and beat Florida on the road. We've been down there time and time again. I can think about the trips that I took and, the teams before me, and no matter what, they just always figured out how to win, whether it was a one-point game, a touchdown game or a blowout. So I think there's no better opportunity than now for this team, given all the circumstances. And I know we'll touch into that later in the show, but it's the Florida Gators. You go on the road, you get to play under the lights. It's the second to last game of the regular season. And in my eyes, if you want to be a contender in college football, you have to win football games like this.
For Tennessee, why has this been a team that they've not been able to get over the hump with? You go back to the early 2000s, the last time Tennessee had won. The last 10 trips have not been kind to the Volunteers. What is it about this rivalry that, regardless of the score, it just seems they can't punch one out?
Yeah, that's a great point. I think the biggest thing is, when we do have opportunities, specifically in the fourth quarter, it's our own efforts that end up hurting us, and, we have to pay for them. And Florida just always finds a way, and, whether it's their crowd, whether it's their players, as much as we hate the Florida Gators as a VFL myself, they have that same despite with the Volunteers. So, we've got an advantage in beating them here, but it'd be a good taste in our mouths to win on the road.
For you, when you go back to your playing days, what was that mindset? What was that road trip like, getting ready to go down there? Josh Heupel has his, standard quotes of, 1-0 every week. We haven't talked about the rivalry history and how it's, tilted in Florida's favor. Yeah. So as a player, do you kind of take on the approach of your coach, or are you kind of looking at the series history? Are you looking at past highlights on your way down?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, because the landscape of college football now, you look at the roster that we have. The majority of the roster has never even been down to the swamp before.
Yeah.
You've got, young players playing. You have transfers playing that didn't necessarily play in the SEC. So I don't know if that's good or bad. Me, myself, and I, growing up in Knoxville, Tennessee, I knew the entire history. I knew that, hey, we have an opportunity to do what a team hasn't done in quite some time. And though we broke the streak, in 2016 when we hadn't beaten them for 13 years at home, I didn't get the opportunity to win in the swamp. And talking to my dad, he was talking about the days in the late 80s, early 90s where it's always been the same. You go down there and it didn't matter what their record was. Yeah. They're up and ready for Tennessee. So as I mentioned prior, this is probably the best opportunity in my eyes that we've had. So I hope that they're looking at the history. And though Coach Heupel kind of says what he needs to come, some of his canned, messages to the media, make no mistake about it, he's letting the team know the opportunity that they have come tomorrow.
I want to go back to about a decade ago when it was 2015, Tennessee making the trip down to Gainesville, and it ends up being a one-point game at the very end. It's 28-27, the final, in favor of the Gators. But Tennessee, it was, a 17-7 score at halftime. Yeah. They, open up with a fiery offense in the second half to extend their lead, and then all of a sudden here comes that fourth quarter, which has been a lot of the problems this year for Tennessee, and the game ends up slipping away. Yeah. What do you remember from that fourth quarter against Florida?
All I remember is looking at Antonio Callaway running 63 yards on a 4th and 14. We had the game won, to be honest with you. We were winning 27-14 with 7 minutes left. They go in and score, and we played a little bit conservatively on the offensive side. I think we've seen that as well this season with this team. Yeah. But one thing that was really working for us is our rushing attack. We didn't have many passing yards, and when you go on the road, you have to have a rushing attack. And, that series, it didn't work out. And, our defense steps up, forces them to a 4th and 14. And again, right, we had holes in our defense. We were playing zone. We were playing soft coverage rather than coming after Will Greer was the quarterback, in 2015. And They broke a 63-yard reception for a touchdown. And other than Neyland Stadium, I don't think I've ever heard a stadium just be so loud.
Wow.
We had the crowd out of it, to be honest. And so that's going to be something that's really, really important is to, when we have them and when we're ahead of them, keep our foot on the gas pedal. We can't play conservatively. You've got to keep the crowd out of it because that's going to give them a huge advantage on the road.
Will that be the biggest difference in this matchup? I mean, most of the final scores, if you go back and look at the series history, most of the time they are pretty close, maybe one possession. When we look at this season, most notably Georgia, we could go to Oklahoma where Tennessee often gets conservative, I think is a nice way to put it, in those fourth quarters. Will Tennessee have to get away from what they've been accustomed to doing to pull out a win here, and that's being aggressive in the fourth quarter?
I think so. I think it's being aggressive and taking care of the ball as well. If you play in a conservative manner, you can't play conservatively and also turn over the ball, right?
Mm-hmm.
Throw just mishap interception. So for Tennessee, you either A, have to play aggressive, or if you're playing conservatively, take care of the ball.
Yeah, and I want to maybe touch a little bit on the Florida Gators. Of course, we'll hear from Florida Gators beat writer later in the show, and he can really give us the inside scoop on the Florida Gators. But a couple of players that are notable for the team, of course, we could go to their running back in Jaden Ball. He has about 800 yards on the year.
Yeah.
That's about 60% of the team's total rushing yards.
Sure.
And even though you can identify who that leading running back is, it still gets me nervous for Tennessee because there's been several games. You go to Mississippi State, they identified who that leading rusher was going to be, yet they still got gashed. Are you seeing progress from Tennessee's run defense since Mississippi State that maybe they can corral Jaden Ball?
I think so. I mean, we look at the past two games, whether it's Oklahoma or New Mexico State. In both of those games, we saw our defense step up, and our tackling is getting better. I think the guys that do want to tackle are showing up more, and the guys that don't are just playing the same way. But ultimately, the guys that want to make plays are going to be out there on the field. I think too, to Florida's credit, their passing game hasn't been that strong this year. DJ Lagway has thrown more interceptions than touchdowns. He's been sacked more times than he's thrown, touchdowns. So these are all things that we need to take advantage of. So our rush defense, as it's getting better, realizing that the pass defense, we've got to make DJ Lagway make mistakes. And when he does make mistakes, capitalize on them.
And that's something that might end up being like the key to this game is turnovers. We've seen Joey Aguilar be a little bit turnover prone the last couple of games, and that's certainly been the case with DJ Lagway. I don't know if maybe with the interim head coach and maybe how inspired they've looked since that Georgia game, maybe even DJ Lagway gets a little bit more involved in the run game. Does that make you more nervous or more confident that maybe they get a little bit more away from the pass game and they really try to win on the ground?
I think it'd be smart. I mean, you look at when we played Gunnar Stockton or, looked when we played John Mateer when he rushed for that 3rd and 16. I think, if I'm the Florida offensive coordinator or the head coach, I'm getting DJ Lagway involved in the rushing attack as much as possible.
Yeah.
Just knowing the mishaps they've had. They have some receivers that aren't playing in this game, so I think they're going to rely heavily on that rushing attack. And with that in mind, why not take DJ Lagway? He's a big quarterback, can run the ball fairly efficiently.
Yeah.
He's a pass-first quarterback, but that hasn't worked out so well for him this season. So I think with that in mind, and, look at this game and Florida's record, they have nothing to lose.
Correct.
Like, let's not forget Tennessee's a ranked team going on the road, and Florida's not. They have a terrible record, interim head coach. So they're just going to throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. And I think one of the things that may is DJ Lagway running a little bit more than he has in the past.
If we take out that Kentucky game in respect to Florida and we just look at how they performed against Georgia and Ole Miss, does it make you nervous kind of seeing how hard it's been for Ole Miss and Georgia to go get wins against Florida despite the 3-7 record they have?
Yeah, I don't think their record truly entails how hard they're going to play you and how close the game is. I do think this will be a four-quarter game, and it's going to come down to the wire. I just think it is. I don't think it's going to be a blowout game. If it is, I hope it's in Tennessee's favor. However, Florida has athletes just like we do. I think from an athletic perspective, they've got players and we've got players. I think that's neck and neck. So I think the difference is our coaching, right? And so do we utilize the playbook and open up the playbook and stay aggressive and make plays? That's what it comes down to, especially on the road.
Yeah, that's a great way to set the scene for who we'll hear from later, a beat writer for the Florida Gators. I want to turn our attention to the squeeze and focus on those couple of Tennessee players and position groups that need to show up in Gainesville. So we mentioned the running back for Florida, and it's interesting looking at your notes for this week. You've identified the running back position group for Tennessee as needing to show up to help deliver a win for the first time in about 10 trips for Tennessee.
Absolutely. Well, we've seen that Joey Aguilar, whether he's on the road or at home, he's going to get his 200 yards, right?
Yes.
Basically, no matter what. So really it's going to be the production of our running back room. Deshaun Bishop, Star Thomas, and Peyton Lewis if he ends up playing and he's healthy.
Right.
These three guys, I think if we implement the rushing attack, I talked about the 2015 game when we played down there when I was on the road in the swamp. They couldn't really stop us.
No.
We had over 250 yards running. Now, granted, Jalen Hurd was in his prime. Some guy named Alvin Kamara was down there, and Josh Dobbs got involved in the rushing game as well. So we saw that Joey can move a little bit against New Mexico State. So maybe we can do some RPOs and maybe he'll tuck it and run, but it's ultimately going to come down to the running back room. So I'm expecting the running backs to step up, and that obviously has to do with winning up front. But these guys, when it's one-on-one and, it's an arm tackle, you're an arm tackle away from breaking a long one, I really want to see us take advantage of that and have longer runs. The longest rush against New Mexico State last week was, 14 yards?
Yes.
So that you're not going to win if you're doing that on the road. So I need production in order for us to win this game. So I'm squeezing the mess out of our running back room.
Yeah, and you mentioned the longest run against Mexico State, and that was by the running back. And then you go to Joey Aguilar, who did get a little bit involved in the run game, and I think he ended up having the team's longest rush for about 27 yards.
Yeah.
And I don't think we've seen him run as effectively since we did in the season opener against Syracuse, where I was like, oh, wow, he's going to be a true dual threat for Tennessee. Yeah. Do we need to see him maybe be more decisive when he does utilize the RPO and he hands it off or he takes it on a quarterback, designed run because of how disruptive Florida's defensive front can be? I think so.
And I think that's a great point that you mentioned, Paige, is, there's times where he can tuck it, or this might sound crazy, but, just take a sack or try to make a play. These unwarranted throws for interceptions that get returned for 25, 30 yards, that can't happen, and it definitely can't happen in the swamp. So I think in times where, the defensive line puts pressure on them, hey, tuck it and make something happen, but don't throw it up and throw an interception.
When you look at the running backs, and right now maybe we'll keep our attention on Star Thomas and Deshaun Bishop, Jarrell Sims, the running backs coach, a couple weeks ago mentioned how, they do a really good job of getting to the second and third level, not just getting those dirty yards, which Deshaun Bishop is so good at. But when you do take out the outlier of like the longest rush, which at times happens to be Joey Aguilar, are you still confident in what you're seeing from the running back room? Like, do you think they're getting to that second and third level enough, or does that happen this weekend?
It happens this weekend. I haven't seen enough out of our running back room as a whole. Being an SEC running back means you can take it the distance at any point in time, and I just haven't seen that as much as I'd like to, as a fan and as a former player. And I know what it's like to be a safety back there. You're the only person, you got to make this tackle or it goes for 80. And, I want to see that a lot more out of our running backs, is making a move, making a shake, breaking a tackle, and taking it the distance.
I wouldn't even mind if they got them involved in a little bit in the pass game, where maybe it is just something that it's either like a check down or get it to them in the flat so they can at least maybe have the boundaries to work with, because I've not seen too much with them, running it up the middle, and I don't know if that changes this weekend. I don't have high confidence that it will, but I think their average rush needs to at least be 5+ in this game.
I think so, right? And you were right at it against New Mexico State, and then you take out Joey's run, you're below that. And I said, last week we have to be productive. I wanted to see, 250+ yards, and we didn't get there. Not saying we'll get there this week, but, we need to be pushing it, especially 5 yards per carry or more.
And you mentioned it a moment ago, TK, talking about Joey Aguilar maybe taking the sack, and that sounds crazy, but that actually leads into the squeeze that I have, and mine is Joey Aguilar's decision-making, because there are times where I know he has tons of trust in his guys like Chris Brazzell Jr., who is a semifinalist for the Biletnikoff, but there are times where the business decision does need to be either throwing it away or taking the sack, because like we mentioned in the first segment, this could be a game of who wins the turnover margin, and you don't need Joey helping them do that. I know a lot of the times the interceptions aren't totally his fault, but the last couple of games, it's him just making too reckless of a decision by trying to get it downfield and it just not panning out.
Yeah, and we knew he was a risk taker, right? But you can only take so much risk if you want to win on the road. When you're playing against a lesser tiered opponent, that's one thing. But Florida's, I'm not saying they're as good as us, but, they've got the talent to beat us if we make mistakes, right? And if we lose that turnover margin and we're on the road in a hostile environment, if he throws an interception, don't think the swamp's going to go crazy, right? And that's really going to take a toll on us. So taking care of the ball is huge. I love that squeeze.
TK, you said it earlier, too, about 2015 getting the crowd out of it. An interception that gets returned for any yardage, I think you will no longer have the crowd out of it, and I don't think they'd be quiet after that first interception or that first turnover.
No. It's going to be really essential this week to just take care of the ball, and I'm excited for our opportunity. I'm probably more excited than the team itself just because I want this win so bad. And looking at the preseason, I had this game circled, and I didn't care what Florida's record was, right? And here we are. We still have an opportunity, and we have an opportunity to finish the season strong.
Yeah. All right, we're going to turn our attention to maybe what the lines are and if Tennessee will cover and what will contribute to Tennessee maybe getting a win in the swamp. We'll be right back.
Your business can't afford the downtime that comes with a leaky roof. So whether you need a repair or a replacement, count on the professionals from McGuire Roofing and Construction. Your protection is our passion. We service and sell all types of roofs and have worked with some of East Tennessee's most recognized names. We have 25 years of experience and free inspection estimates, plus best in business warranties. Put an end to your roofing problems today by calling McGuire Roofing and Construction.
Welcome to Live Ball, presented by Harper Volkswagen. Here are your hosts, Paige Dauer and Todd Kelly Jr.
Welcome back into Live Ball. Paige Dauer alongside Todd Kelly Jr., former defensive back for Tennessee. When we look to this game to Tennessee, I know we had just mentioned we'll look at the lines. And what I found interesting, TK, going back and looking at the series history, it seems that the average score or point total that the Tennessee scores is around that 21-point mark. Yeah. But the over-under total is like 57 points.
Oh, wow.
And I don't know, Tennessee and whatever games they've been in, it's always been something that's like 50 and more. Of course, they didn't meet that against New Mexico State, which was a bit of a surprise. But would you say Tennessee and Florida get to 57 total points?
That's a tough one, Paige. I'm always on the spot. I'm not the best bettor in the world. So on the road, I think the game might be a little more ugly than we'd like it to be, and maybe not enough points from both teams, and so I'm going to take the under.
I was going to take the under too because I was looking at the other road games that Tennessee has had this season, and oftentimes they're not really getting into the 30 plus. You could specifically look to Alabama. I think they were held to about 20 points in that game. So maybe with how the trends are recently too, what we saw against Georgia, I don't know if we're going to see that again, and I don't know what that switch has been where they've not been as successful. Maybe there's just more tape on Tennessee, but yeah, I wouldn't be confident that they hit the 57 total either.
Yeah, I wish I didn't have to say this, but that Georgia game has shown to be an anomaly of the season. We thought we were going to get that consistently the entire season, and we just haven't seen that from a productivity perspective. So I'm taking the under. And, with taking the under, that means our defense has to show up too,
yes.
right?
And they've looked good the last handful of games, specifically against Oklahoma, and we've talked about it a number of times. Just unfortunately, you didn't fully realize it because they have a kicker who gets to midfield and can just get it through the uprights. But when we look at the spread as well, it's another close game. It's 4.5 points right now. Is Tennessee in a position where they can win close games again?
They're going to have to be. I think this is another field goal game where we have an opportunity to win. So I think the Vols will win this game, but I think it'll be by a field goal. So I'll take Florida covering the spread in this game.
Okay, I like that. I was also looking at a couple of the other ones, and the closest margin of victory was in 1928, and it was 13-12. And their largest margin, you mentioned the 90s earlier, I believe, it was 45-3. I have a feeling it might look how it did a century ago, not a century plus ago.
Yeah. Hey, I'd love to go back to the 90s again and experience that and, kind of repeat that tomorrow. But to be realistic, I think it's going to be a close game. And even if we win by one, at this point, just get out of there with a victory.
Yeah, last 10 matchups, Tennessee is 3-7 in this series. For you and kind of our final points, who would you identify as like that key player or that key moment in this game that could help snap the losing streak for Tennessee?
Oh, that's a great question. This is going to be pretty simple, and everybody's going to be like, oh, man, but it's Joey. It's Joey Aguilar. You have to take care of the ball, Joey. You have to make the right decisions on the road. Your team believes in you. On Wednesday, just to see the morale and feel the air in the room, I shall say. And, Joey was leading. He was, and, the guys look up to him. And though we're more than likely not going to qualify for the college football playoff, I truly believe they know the opportunity of what it means to go on the road, what it means to play the Florida Gators. And you're not playing them, the following year, right? So, they're not a every year recurring opponent anymore. So this is your opportunity to finally knock them off at the Swamp.
Yeah, and I do like that we continue to keep our attention on Joey. And what's so nice about what Joey's been able to do as a new quarterback within the system is, and it might be a common occurrence, just not as vocalized, but he spends so much time in the film room with position groups like the offensive linemen, the running backs, and the wide receivers. And especially with the linemen, it's all about figuring out what their tendencies are. I mean, so much pressure gets up the middle, and I believe that might happen again this week. So with the added time that they have in the film room, hopefully that will allow him to recognize when he does need to throw it away.
Yeah, absolutely. And, one piece of the puzzle of the offensive line is Wendell Moore Jr. He went down last week, and, we're not sure if he's going to play this week or not. And so if he's not, whoever his reserve is, we've got to stay true to what the offensive line stands for. And when somebody goes down, the standard can't go down. You have to keep it where it is. So excited how our tackles have played. We'll see if our guards and center can step up as well.
Awesome, TK. Well, I appreciate it. And where can people find you?
Yeah, so I'm here in Knoxville, Tennessee, working with Merrill Lynch of the Kegel Cross Group. And just so blessed to work for such an awesome team and firm. The wealth management industry itself, as Paige knows, is fantastic just because we love working with our clients, whether you're here locally or anywhere across the country. So you can reach me at todd.e.kelly@ml.com.
All right, so you're taking Tennessee or Florida?
Go Vols, baby. Go Vols.
I love it.
Go Vols.
Hopefully next Friday for our last regular season.
I've been saying that since 2003, though. So
eventually you got to be right? Awesome. When we come back, we'll hear from the Florida beat writer to preview and dive a little bit deeper into the Florida Gators and what the vibe is like down in Gainesville. We'll be right back.
I'm VFL Chris Brown. Experience the VW brand proudly being produced in the great state of Tennessee. Harper Volkswagen is a proud partner of Tennessee Athletics. Go Vols.
Welcome to Live Ball, presented by Harper Volkswagen. Here are your hosts, Paige Dauer and Todd Kelly Jr.
Our newest guest, and Kevin Brockway. Kevin, thank you so much for making time for us this morning. I'm doing well. How are you?
The Swamp too that we must discuss, and certainly for Florida, obviously the 10-game winning streak against the Swamp against Tennessee is on the line, and this is a Gator team that's kind of beat up and battered, but playing for pride. And they're going to honor Urban Meyer before the game too, which might add a little juice to it. And it's another sellout, so there's a little bit to play for here for Florida.
And you mentioned it, regardless if there's a conversation around the interim head coach and will that be Lane Kiffin or what the record says for the Florida Gators, like Florida is always going to play tough. It seems that they never lack energy in these games, maybe a little bit against Kentucky they did earlier, but they played tough against Georgia. They played tough against Ole Miss while being in this interim type coaching loom. How is it going to be against Tennessee where regardless of what their record is, this is always such a tough out for Tennessee?
Yeah, I think getting off to a good start is important, and that was probably the issue in the Tennessee game. I think what happened in, the Kentucky game, what happened was 4 turnovers in the first half, right? You fall behind 24-7, and then kind of in the second half, it was kind of a game where you let the clock run out. It was one of those things, you bench DJ Lagway, and, it didn't, the run defense kind of slipped in the second half there. But, Ole Miss and Georgia, they played pretty competitive into the fourth quarter. I mean, I think second halves in general have been an issue this month. I don't know if that's adjustments. I don't know if that's fatigue because the team is not as deep as it was early in the season with the high number of injuries. But Florida has to kind of cross that hurdle, get off to the good start, but then sustain it for 4 quarters. That's been really an issue on and off throughout the season.
We're joined now by Kevin Brockway with the Gainesville Sun, beat writer for the Florida Gators football team. Earlier in the show, I was talking with VFL Todd Kelly Jr., and we identified the turnover margin as maybe a sneaky key to a win for either team. And it kind of comes down to the quarterback position, too, right? DJ Lagway with 13 interceptions. Joey Aguilar has been a little bit of a turnover-prone quarterback the last handful of games. What do you think is contributing for DJ Lagway with these up and down games where maybe it's a game he has 4 interceptions and then he can avoid an interception in a game? What do you think is the leading factor for maybe some of the hot and cold that we've seen out of DJ Lagway?
Well, he was very banged up in the offseason, didn't get a lot of time in terms of physical reps. And Billy Napier was trying to sell us on mental reps in the film room, but zone coverages have been a problem for him. I go back to the Texas A&M game. He kind of led Florida on these 2 great touchdown drives when they played man coverage, and they switched the zone, and it shut him down for most of the rest of the game. He had 3 points. So it seems like that's his kryptonite at the moment, and he's got to kind of figure that out. They're pretty banged up at the receiver position right now, too. A lot of what they thought they were going to have in the beginning of the season in terms of this like dynamic receiving core. Dallas Wilson is out for the year. Eugene Wilson is out for the year. So you're really left with, J. Michael Sturdivant, who had a nice 57-yard touchdown catch last week, the UCLA transfer. Vernell Brown, who got off to a good start, freshman receiver. He's questionable for the game. I mean, TJ Abrams has stepped up. So I think that's kind of contributed to is just how banged up the receiver core is right now. But DJ is starting to look a little healthier. He's throwing the deep ball a little better than he was early in the season. And I think he's going to be still fired up and motivated. I still think he feels like he has to leave something on tape potentially for the next coach.
Absolutely. And when we, maybe identify that the wide receiver room is a little bit banged up for the Florida Gators, it seems that a lot of their offense really does go through their rushing attack. And you could specifically identify Jaden Ball as the key contributor for that, especially when they're in the red zone or needing a score. It's been Ball for the Florida Gators. What's made him so successful this season for the rush attack?
Yeah, you could argue that he's the team MVP this season. 6'1", 231. You saw it a little bit last year when he got his opportunity when Montrell Johnson got hurt. I mean, he's a very good pass catcher too. He's got really good hands. So rushing and receiving, 6 rushing touchdowns, 1 receiving touchdowns. He's kind of a versatile guy that way. He can do a lot of different things. And he was Tyler Miles, the strength coach, said pound for pound, he's the strongest guy on the team. In terms of like what he does, benching weight. So, he's a guy that can break tackles, obviously, if he didn't break tackles, and has the speed too. So he's an amazing story when you consider coming out of Atlanta. He played a lot at linebacker, and he was recruited as a linebacker by a lot of schools. And then just kind of, when Billy Napier and his staff got into it, they kind of saw him as a running back, and he was interested and came here as a running back, and he's been a nice find, and he's a guy that I think the next coach is going to want to keep because he brings a lot to the table.
Kevin, you mentioned the running attack for the Florida Gators. Do you imagine that that's where Florida will find most of its offensive success against Tennessee, who doesn't typically have the strongest rush defense in the SEC?
Well, I saw their pass defense was kind of suspect too, and I know Jermod McCoy being out is really hurt in that regard. But I do think with the run, it's always important to establish the run. I think under Billy Gonzalez, what we're seeing is a little more of him spreading out a little bit and actually using DJ Lagway to run a little bit. And, Lagway was a guy coming out of high school that was billed as a dual threat guy. But we didn't really see much of the run game under Napier. We're seeing a little bit more to Billy Gonzalez. He scored his first rushing touchdown of his career last week against Ole Miss, which is pretty incredible to think it, 17, 18 games into his career. But he's a guy that, Lagway's 247 pounds. He's a big guy. He had the calf issues early in the season too, and that might have contributed to him not running as much, but he seems like he's healthier. So don't be surprised if you see, DJ in some design runs as well.
All right, we're joined by Kevin Brockway with the Gainesville Sun. We identified maybe a little bit of some question marks for the past game for the Florida Gators, but for Tennessee's offense, that is their bread and butter, especially the connection with Joey Aguilar and Chris Brazzell Jr., and really even in their slot receiver and Braylon Staley. What kind of pressure does that put on the Florida Gators, especially their secondary, and needing to find some productivity there?
Well, you talk about pressure. I think that's what Florida is going to have to do. Is bring the heat a little bit in that game to kind of counteract that. And the pass rush has been kind of sporadic. It was pretty good against Ole Miss. They designed some pretty good. Ron Roberts designed some pretty good blitzes. They had 5 sacks and 7 tackles for loss in that game. So they're hoping that it can kind of carry over. But there have been also some games where they've had no sacks. It's kind of been hit or miss. Caleb Banks is coming back this week, which, could help. This was a guy that was an all-SEC preseason projected first-round pick. He had a pretty bad foot injury in camp and then tried to play against LSU. It didn't work out, but he had surgery on it and seems to be ready to go. And he's a guy that can bring pressure up the middle for sure. And, they did lose George Gums, though, for the rest of the season, one of their edge rushers. But Jaden Woods, is freshman, had an interception. He's had a few sacks. He's been a nice find on the edge. So I think that's the key. Devin Moore's had a really nice season at corner too, and he stayed healthy. And he was a guy that, if you remember a couple of years ago, had a big interception in that game at the Swamp. Cormani McLean is playing steadier in the secondary. So I think they're going to need that combination of rush and coverage to work pretty well in order to try to curtail Tennessee's pass attack, which, as you mentioned, is impressive. And the tempo too, of course.
And Kevin, you mentioned it with Caleb Banks. Coming back from the injury, of course, playing in just that one game against LSU, and even the fact that he came back for another year despite being a high draft prospect. I wonder, for you, who covers the team closely, you're around the team, week in and week out. It feels to me that the return of Caleb Banks is more than just a guy who has high productivity and can be disruptive in the defensive front, especially with a banged up interior line for Tennessee's offense. Does it speak more to the mindset of this team that he's willing and wanting to come back despite what the record says, despite having the interim head coach? Like, they're at home and Caleb Banks is coming back. Does that signal to a larger narrative for the energy of this Florida Gators team?
Yeah, without question. I mean, these guys have not quit. They didn't quit under Billy. It's not really for a lack of effort. Like I said, the only half where you've kind of questioned the motivation was maybe the second half against Kentucky. Again, the turnovers played into that, but for the most part, this is a team that's played hard. I mean, I think the issue is they haven't played well, in certain spots, and some of that has had to do with crucial penalties at key times has really hurt this team. And you go back to certainly when Billy was coaching, a lot of substitution errors. They've cleaned that up a little bit under Billy Gonzalez, I think, but I do think too that every once in a while, I think Tyreek Sapp had a bad offsides penalty that could have gotten him off the field on third down or forced a punt. And then the next play, Ole Miss throws a touchdown pass. So it's been that kind of season. The penalties have been crippling at times. And it's just, playing a sustained clean game for 4 quarters, penalties, turnovers, obviously. That's been, highly elusive for Florida. And that's why they are where they sit right now.
And Kevin, a final thought from you. When you look at this matchup and, it's been 10 trips since Tennessee's won in Gainesville, what do you think will be the key factor for the Florida Gators to pull off the win and preserve their winning streak at home?
Yeah, I think they're going to have to score, be consistent because like I said, and handle Tennessee's tempo. I think the good thing is they've seen USF, they've seen Mississippi State, 2 teams earlier in the season that play fast, very similar to Tennessee. So obviously substitutions, getting guys on and off the field is going to be key. Avoid those kind of penalties, and just try to stay the course for 4 quarters. If DJ Lagway can get a little roll, turnover margin, as you mentioned, maybe you play a tight game that way, and then you steal a few. And that's going to be crucial. That's crucial really in every game, but I think that if you can win the turnover margin, steal a few possessions, and put some points on the board, because this is facing this Tennessee offense, you're not going to get by winning this game scoring in the 20s. I think you got to be at least in the 30s in this kind of a game.
Yeah, Kevin, I really appreciate your time. Where can people find you and your work?
Yeah, Gatorsports.com, Gainesville.com, and I'm on Twitter X at Kevin Brockway G1.
Awesome. Kevin, thank you so much for your time and enjoy this weekend in what should be a really exciting game between Tennessee and Florida and a night game in the Swamp.
Thank you, Paige. Yeah, it should be interesting.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kevin. All right, guys, when we come back, we'll talk final thoughts and maybe one key interview you all should listen to if you are also on your way down to Gainesville. We'll be right back.
I'm VFL Chris Brown. Experience the VW brand proudly being produced in the great state of Tennessee. Harper Volkswagen is a proud partner of Tennessee Athletics. Go Vols!
Welcome to Live Ball, presented by Harper Volkswagen. Here are your hosts, Paige Dauer and Todd Kelly Jr.
Welcome back into Live Ball. Paige Dauer here. Todd Kelly Jr. Joined us earlier in the program and had some really key points about where this matchup could go and where it needs to end up for Tennessee. Of course, not winning in their last 10 trips down to Gainesville. We identified the 2015 game as a game that probably is pretty similar to how Tennessee has played this season, getting conservative in the fourth quarter. That's kind of been the kryptonite for the Volunteers this season. They were close against Georgia, got conservative. They had a chance against Oklahoma, but got a little conservative. And that's exactly what happened in 2015 when that head coach and that Tennessee football team ended up getting conservative there in the fourth quarter. For Tennessee to get a rivalry win against Florida, it's all about staying aggressive, keeping your foot on the gas like they do really through much of the first three quarters in every game that they're in. The other place to identify is the defense for Tennessee. They have to find a way to slow down the running attack from the Florida Gators. We've identified Jaden Ball as the main guy for Florida, as he has about 60% of the team's total rushing yards this season. But of course, we've seen a handful of times where even when you can identify that main guy for the opponent, Tennessee has struggled to slow down the running game. And when you get DJ Lagway, who can be a turnover-prone quarterback involved in quarterback design runs, it could be a lethal game for Tennessee if they're not able to slow down the rushing attack. But for Joey Aguilar, it comes down to the turnover margin, and he will do it less. TK was talking about sometimes it's smarter just to take the sack, take the hit, throw it away. And it'll come down to his decision-making and his being in sync with his offensive lineman and who's downfield for him to go and give the ball to. But it should be a really exciting game. Although TK is taking Tennessee, I might end up taking Florida in this one. I'm kind of where a lot of Vol fans are, where sometimes I feel like I have to see it before I can believe it. I think it'll be a close game. And if Tennessee wins, I think it'll be because they win in a close game in the Swamp against the Florida Gators. But as you guys are probably mostly on your way down to Gainesville tomorrow morning, I had this interview with Felix Akpara, the big man for Tennessee basketball, and where he's finding his leadership this season. You can definitely find that back on our homepage, fulldisclosurepro.com, or on our YouTube page, where he really talked about his leadership that he's been kind of diving into this season and how that's allowed him to be a better player on the field for Tennessee as they get ready to go to Las Vegas for the Players Era Men's Championship. But that's all we have for you guys today here on Live Ball. We'll have so much more on post-game coverage on Saturday, and then one more regular season Live Ball against Vanderbilt next Friday. I'll see you guys then.
Welcome to Live Ball, presented by Harper Volkswagen. Here are your hosts, Paige Dauer and Todd Kelly Jr.
I'm VFL Chris Brown. Experience the VW brand proudly being produced in the great state of Tennessee. Harper Volkswagen is a proud partner of Tennessee Athletics. Go Vols!
Business can't afford the downtime that comes with a leaky roof? So whether you need a repair or a replacement, count on the professionals from McGuire Roofing and Construction. Your protection is our passion. We service and sell all types of roofs and have worked with some of East Tennessee's most recognized names. We have 25 years of experience and free inspection estimates, plus best in business warranties. Put an end to your roofing problems today by calling McGuire Roofing and Construction.